For my jewelry and creative product brands out there, if you're trying to create massive momentum in your business to reach your goals, this episode is for you. Today on this week's podcast, I am talking about visionary habits that create massive momentum in your business. And I think this topic is very timely and important. We've had a very interesting year. And if you are someone who is trying to still hit your goals, regardless of what has happened in your business this year, then you definitely want to listen up and consume the entire episode because it's actually a really good one. Hey there, I'm Tracy Matthews. I'm the Chief Visionary Officer of Flourish and Thrive Academy. I'm also the host of the Thrive by Design podcast, and I help overwhelmed and struggling jewelrypreneurs become in-demand brands with a little thing that I call the desired brand effect. We help you attract the right customers, keep those customers for life, and scale those results. Now, I share this in depth on the podcast episode, but as I was recording the episode, I was talking a little bit about an experience that I had. I'm doing some consulting for a nonprofit. I'm actually on their board of advisors, and they were asking me a little bit more about some applications that they wanted to bring into their business. So I was asking them, I'm like, what's the vision that you have for this community that you're trying to create? And they couldn't answer the question. And they're like, well, that's why we have you here, Tracy, is so that you can create the vision. Well, I was happy to do that, and that's all fine. But what I was really trying to dial deep and listen in on what they were saying that they wanted for their business. And I think one of the biggest problems that I see some of the brands that I work with in the Flourish and Thrive Academy programs is that a lot of times they actually don't really have a big vision for where they're going. And here's what I mean by that. Sure, they have goals. They have like financial goals and all these other things, but they're not thinking about like what it is that they're trying to create in their life. They don't understand how to paint the picture of what they want their life to look like or their business to look like or where they're actually going. Instead, they're just only focused on one thing. And instead of thinking like, how is X going to impact Y? And how are these things going to all work together? And how will I actually feel when I get there? They just are thinking about, okay, well, I want to hit this number. And I guess if I want to grow my business, I have to have a 20% increase. And this is really hard for me. And, you know, I've taken this a little bit for granted because vision casting and being someone who is a visionary, being able to think really big picture and understand like what big picture thinking looks like, it's not very hard for me to do that. But I realize that a lot of people really take that for granted. In fact, for many years, I would be on calls with our students who were interested in some of our programs. And I would ask them, I'm like, where do you see yourself in 3 years? And they couldn't see themselves 3 years from now. And that is why adopting these visionary habits is going to be so powerful. So I'm just going to share with you the first step of this right now, which I've kind of already clarified. There's actually 5 steps to this process, and that's how you kind of create what you want in your life and your business. And if you haven't already listened to episode 261 of the Thrive by Design podcast, I'll share a link at the end with how you can listen to it. And step 1 of this is really about casting a big vision for what it is you're trying to create. Now, if you've ever followed The Secret or any of this like manifestation talk about how you can create whatever it is that you want in your life, there is some validity to being able to create a vision board and think about these big hairy goals that you have and paint that picture. And the reason why vision boarding works so well for people who are action takers and actually take the steps to make that vision happen is because they're visually seeing, they're painting the picture of what it is that they want to create. And so creating a big vision of what you want to create in your business, I always like to start just 3 years out, not necessarily more than that. I think 3 years is a good enough amount of time where you can see far enough in the future to what it is that you're trying to build in your life and your business, and not too far that those goals kind of change, right? So I use this example on the podcast about really wanting to be in a conscious relationship. So I would write in my journal every day. In fact, we have a little bundle that I mentioned on the podcast that has journal prompts where you can kind of dive deeper into this vision exercise. I talked about the kind of relationship that I wanted to bring into my life. And although I'd had many relationships over the past, 25 or 30 years that I've been an adult, in fact, I was married even when I was younger, I wasn't really meeting the kind of person that I wanted to create. So I started, many, many years ago. This process started a long time ago for me, probably about 10 years ago, really painting this picture. But I would write down very frequently, I would say, in my journal, like how I wanted to feel when I was with that person, the experiences that we were going to have when we were together, and so on and so forth. And eventually the person actually showed up in my life, and that's my boyfriend, Jason, who was on the podcast last week. So if you've heard me talk about him, you get to experience his brilliance in our podcast. But that I've done this with many other things too. When I was starting Flourish and Thrive Academy 8 years ago, my initial vision for this was to just develop courses and programs that actually helped the jewelry industry. And since then, we've expanded to creative products and beyond just jewelry. And we've had, masterminds and bigger coaching programs so that we can really expand our audience and expand our reach with the people who we serve. And so that vision has changed over time, but it always started with that bigger picture vision, and then taking that back and dialing in the next steps of this in order to make it happen. And the more you can get into that habit, the more you're going to start building a business around the kind of lifestyle that you want. I don't want to spill the beans, but I share some really good examples of students in our community who have done this and who have been really clear on what it is that they've tried to create. So if you want to hear more about that, I'm going to share a story of how one person has built her business to a couple $100,000 a year without a bunch of employees, how another designer in our community has saved over $18,000 a month by casting that vision and working backwards in order to make it happen. So if you want to listen to that, head on over to flourishthriveacademy.com/261 and you can listen to the full episode. Or if you're an Apple Podcast person, head on over to flourishthriveacademy.com/Apple and you can listen right there on the Apple Podcast app. Thanks so much for listening today. This is Tracy Matthews signing off.